On the other hand, looking at a Vanity Fair piece, anti-gay sentiment in Uganda has climbed in recent years, due in no small part to American evangelicals who spent more than $20 million fighting LGBTQ rights in the country between 2007 and 2020, according to the Washington Post. Scott Lively, an American pastor, spearheaded this effort in the early 2000s, participating in a series of popular anti-gay lectures in Uganda, describing homosexuality as a disease propagated by the West. Several years later, Uganda's parliament proposed the initial legislation known as the Kill the Gays Bill that was supported by a number of American Christian groups and eventually signed into law. So if you can talk about what the U.S. can do, people in the U.S., but also what the president of Uganda has done. He sounded like he wanted to sound more moderate by sending the bill back to the legislature, but then signed off on a bill that could give some LGBTQ people the death penalty.
Thank you for that question. And I want to say that we, as much as we welcome President Biden's strong and powerful condemnation of this law, I think for us as advocates and activists, we've been pushing this. We've been interacting with our U.S. partners and telling them that something big and dangerous is coming, and it's coming from your country. Please have ways that you stop it before it comes to our country. And I think that has failed. So as much as I welcome President Biden's condemnation, I think there needs to be a lot of work done back home within the United States to make sure that these, exporters of hate into a country like Uganda, because Uganda seems to be geographically positioned for, for these people to come into our country and to test everything negative that they want to test in our country. So that needs to be stopped from the backyard in the United States before it comes this side. So now that we are in this quagmire and in this danger, we call on the global partners, global citizens to keep condemning this law, to keep putting pressure on our leaders to make sure that they honor the international covenants that they've been signatories to and domesticate them and treat their citizens as human beings, not as collateral damage, the way our country is doing with the LGBTIQ community. In 2012, my organization that was shut down last year in August by the government, Sexual Minorities Uganda, together with partners, Center for Constitutional Rights, CCR, based in New York, we filed a case against Scott Lively. You can find the information on CCR's website and so on. We did that because for us, it was important to take homophobia or institutionalized homophobia back to where it came from. And it came from Scott Lively, so we wanted to take it back to him. And the courts heard us. Unfortunately, there was a jurisdiction issue. Scott Lively appealed the case, but then again, it was ruled in our favor anyway. So these are things that we are going to continue doing, taking homophobia back where it belongs, even if it means us losing our lives. Yes, government wants to put, advocates and actual LGBTIQ persons to death, but we are also prepared until the last drop of our blood, as long as we live our truth in this country.
Yo, 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 what's going on, everybody? It's your dude, BubzDaGawd here, and we are here to read, okay, the anti-homosexuality bill that unfortunately has been enacted in Uganda, and there are people all over the world who are celebrating this bill. Again, homophobia, queerphobia, whatever you want to call it, is unfortunately still alive. It was once covert and now it's screaming to become overt. And Uganda is going to be one of those countries, unfortunately, where it will manifest, which is so sad. This bill, I believe, was drafted, okay, I want to say anywhere between like 2011 to like 2013, and now it's being put into effect. Not because there's any statistical, factual, objective evidence that is so overwhelming that completely just demonizes the queer community. It is from evangelical Christians who have a hate narrative towards queer people, and because they can't seem to accomplish an anti-homosexuality bill in America, they were able to push it in another country as well as supplementing that country financially. So of course they're going to take the money, and of course they're going to go ahead and try to get rid of queer people, again with no facts, no statistics, no data, overwhelming data to support their ideologies, okay? If you look in the description box below, there are going to be two links that you can read for yourself, okay? The first one is from jurist.org that breaks down the anti-homosexuality bill that unfortunately, again, is enacted in Uganda. And then the other article is from the Williams Institute, okay? From UCLA School of Law in California, that basically states that from an objective, factual, statistical standpoint, okay, that's what you do when you're doing a proper analysis. You dig deep into it and you look around to see the complete 360, okay, that says that this bill was created with no evidence whatsoever. But again, this bill is a evangelical Christian bill that has been enacted over there, and the reason why I'm fighting so hard over here and supporting all my other queer brothers and sisters around the world is the fact that if that bill can be established in Uganda by evangelical Christians, I would be a fool to believe that it cannot happen here. And if I'm not mistaken, there has been so many anti-LGBT laws that have been drafted which have broken new records, unfortunately. So for queer people, if you're listening to this, prepare yourself mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and physically. Get you a weapon, get you a CPL, get into a self-defense class, because now there's going to be a purge and a green light to literally demonize, ostracize, and unfortunately execute queer people without any consequence, okay? So let's get into the anti-homosexuality bill. This is going to be quite lengthy, so make sure that you got something to smoke on, something to drink on. You know, we like to be in altered states so that we can have a more nuanced and contextual, okay, conversation, which is desperately needed, all right? The Anti-Homosexuality Bill of 2023, the Memorandum. First is the principles of the bill. The object of the bill is to establish a comprehensive and enhanced legislation to protect the traditional family by A, prohibiting any form of sexual relations between two persons of the same sex and the promotion or recognition of sexual relations between persons of the same sex. B, strengthening the nation's capacity to deal with emerging internal and external threats to the traditional heterosexual family. This legislation further recognizes the fact that same-sex attraction is not an innate and immutable characteristic. C, protecting the cherished culture of the people of Uganda, legal, religious, and traditional family values of Ugandans against the acts of sexual rights activists seeking to impose their values of sexual promiscuity on the people of Uganda. Wow. And D, protecting children and youth who are made vulnerable to sexual abuse through homosexuality and related acts. This sounds like some shit from the 60s, my God. Second, defects in existing law. This proposed legislation is designed to address the gaps in the provisions of other laws in Uganda. For example, the Penal Code Act Cap 120. The Penal Code Act Cap 120 has no comprehensive provision catering for anti-homosexuality. It focuses on unnatural offenses under Section 145 and lacks provisions for penalizing the procurement, promoting, disseminating literature and other pantographic materials concerning the offenses of homosexuality. As a result, there is need for a legislation to enhance offenses relating to homosexuality and clear provisions for charging, investigating, prosecuting, convicting, and sentencing of offenders. This legislation seeks to supplement the provisions of the Constitution of the Republic of Uganda and the Penal Code Act Cap 120 by criminalizing same-sex sexual acts and related acts. 3. Remedies. The bill seeks to A. Prohibit marriage between persons of the same sex. B. Prohibit and penalize homosexual behavior and related practices. C. Prohibit the promotion of homosexuality. And D. Protect and provide assistance and payment of comprehension to victims of homosexuality. Now we're moving into the arrangement of clauses. Part 1 is preliminary, which is the interpretation. Part 2, prohibition of homosexuality. The offense of homosexuality, aggravated homosexuality, attempt to commit homosexuality, protection, assistance, and payment of compensation to victims of homosexuality, consent of the victim, and confidentiality. Part 3, related offenses and penalties. Aiding and abetting homosexuality. Conspiracy to engage in homosexuality. Procuring homosexuality by threats, etc. Detention with intent to commit homosexuality. Brothels. Same-sex marriage. Promotion of homosexuality. And Part 4, miscellaneous provisions, special powers of court, extradition, and regulations. A bill for an act entitled the Anti-Homosexuality Act 2023. An act to prohibit any form of sexual relations between persons of the same sex, prohibit the promotion or recognition of sexual relations between persons of the same sex, and for related matters. Be it enacted by Parliament as follows. Part 1, preliminary. 1, interpretation. In this act, unless the context otherwise requires, authority means having power and control over other people because of your knowledge and official position, and shall include a person who exercises religious, political, economic, or social authority. Child means a person below the age of 18 years. Court means a chief magistrate's court. Currency point has the value assigned to it in the schedule to this act. Disability means a substantial limitation of daily life activities caused by physical, mental, or sensory impairment and environment barriers resulting in limited participation. Felony means an offense which is declared by law to be a felony, or, if not declared to be a misdemeanor, is punishable without proof of previous conviction, with death or with imprisonment for 3 years or more. HIV means the human immunodeficiency virus. Homosexuality means same gender or same-sex sexual acts. Minister means the minister responsible for ethics and integrity. Misdemeanor means any offense which is not a felony. Serial offender means a person who has previous convictions of the offense of homosexuality or related offenses. The sexual acts include A, physical sexual activity that does not necessarily culminate in intercourse or may include the touching of another's breast, vagina, penis, or anus. B, stimulation or penetration of a vagina or mouth or anus or any part of the body of any person, however slight be a sexual organ. C, the unlawful use of any object or organ by a person on another person's sexual organ or anus or mouth. Sexual organ means a vagina, penis, or any artificial sexual contraption. Touching includes touching. Okay? A, with any part of the body. B, with anyone else. And C, through anything. and in particular includes touching amounting to penetration of any sexual organ, anus, or mouth. Victim includes a person who is involved in homosexual activities against his or her will. Part 2, homosexuality and related practices. The offense of homosexuality. 1, a person commits the offense of homosexuality if the person A, penetrates the anus or mouth of another person of the same sex with his penis or any other sexual contraption. B, uses any object or sexual contraption to penetrate or stimulate the sexual organ of a person of the same sex. C, touches another person with the intent of committing the act of homosexuality. D, holds out as a lesbian, gay, transgender, a queer, or any other sexual or gender identity that is contrary to the binary categories of male and female. Second, a person who commits an offense under this section is liable, on conviction, to imprisonment for 10 years. 3, aggravated homosexuality. 1, a person commits the offense of aggravated homosexuality where the A, person against whom the offense is committed is below the age of 18 years. B, offender is a person living with HIV. Wow. C, offender is a parent or guardian of the person against whom the offense is committed. D, offender is a person having authority or control over the person against whom the offense is committed. E, victim of the offense is a person with a disability. F, offender is a serial offender. Or G, offender applies, administers, or causes to be used by any man or woman, any drug, matter, or thing with intent to stupefy or overpower him or her so as to enable any person to have unlawful carnal connection with any persons of the same sex. Second, a person who commits the offense of aggravated homosexuality shall be liable, on conviction, to imprisonment for 10 years. 3, where a person is charged with the offense under this section, that person shall undergo a medical examination to ascertain his or her HIV status. 4, attempt to commit homosexuality. 1, a person who attempts to commit the offense of homosexuality commits an offense and is liable, on conviction, to imprisonment for 2 years. 2, a person who attempts to commit the offense of aggravated homosexuality commits an offense and is liable, on conviction, to a term of imprisonment for 10 years. 5, protection, assistance, and payment of compensation to victims of homosexuality. 1, a victim of homosexuality shall not be penalized for any crime committed as a direct result of his or her involvement in homosexuality. 2, a victim of homosexuality shall be assisted to enable his or her views and concerns to be presented and considered at the appropriate stages of the criminal proceedings. 3, where a person is convicted of homosexuality or aggravated homosexuality under this act, the court may, in addition to any punishment provided, order the person to pay compensation to the victim of any amount which, in the opinion of the court, is just, having regard to the physical, sexual, or psychological harm suffered by the victim, the degree of force used, medical and other expenses incurred by the victim as a result of the offense. 4, the order referred to in subsection 3 shall be deemed to be a decree under the Civil Procedure Act and shall be executed in the manner provided under the Act. 6, consent of a victim of homosexuality. Consent of the victim to homosexuality shall not be a defense under this Act. 7, confidentiality. 1, at any stage of the investigation or trial of an offense under this Act, a law enforcement officer, prosecutor, judicial officer, medical practitioner, and any party to the case shall recognize the rights to privacy of the victim. 2, for purposes of subsection 1, proceedings of the court in cases involving children and other cases where the court considers it appropriate shall be conducted in camera. 3, any editor, publisher, reporter, or columnist in case of printed materials, announcer or producer in case of television, and radio producer or director of a film in case of the movie industry, or any person utilizing tri-media facilities or information technology who publishes or causes the publicity of the names and personal circumstances or any other information tending to establish the victim's identity without authority of the victim or court, commits an offense and is liable on conviction to a fine not exceeding 250 currency points. Part 3, related offenses and penalties. 8, aiding and abetting homosexuality. A person who aids, abets, counsels, or procures another person to engage in acts of homosexuality commits an offense and is liable on conviction to imprisonment for 2 years. 9, conspiracy to engage in homosexuality. A person who conspires with another to induce another person of the same sex by any means of false pretense or other fraudulent means to permit any person of the same sex to have unlawful carnal knowledge of him or her commits an offense and is liable, on conviction, to imprisonment for 2 years. Procuring homosexuality by threats. 1, a person who, A, by threat or intimidation, procures or attempts to procure any woman or man to have any unlawful carnal knowledge with any persons of the same sex. B, by false pretenses or false representations, procures any woman or man to have any unlawful carnal connection with any person of the same sex. Commits an offense and is liable, on conviction, to imprisonment for 5 years. 2, a person shall not be convicted of an offense under this section upon the evidence of one witness only, unless that witness is corroborated in some material particular by evidence implicating the accused. 11, detention with intent to commit homosexuality. A person who detains another person with the intent to commit acts of homosexuality with him or her or with any other person commits an offense and is liable on conviction to imprisonment for 2 years. 12, brothels. A person who keeps a house, room, set of rooms, or place of any kind for purposes of homosexuality commits an offense and is liable on conviction to imprisonment for 7 years. B, a person being the owner or occupier of premises or having or acting or assisting in the management or control of the premises induces or knowingly causes any man or woman to resort to or be upon such premises for the purpose of being unlawfully and carnally known by any man or woman of the same sex, whether such carnal knowledge is intended to be with any particular man or woman, commits an offense and is liable on conviction to imprisonment for 1 year. 13, same-sex marriage. A person who purports to contract a marriage with another person of the same sex commits the offense of homosexuality and shall be liable on conviction to imprisonment for 10 years. So even if you have queer people who are trying to be in a monogamous relationship, trying to be committed to each other, two grown-ass adults having consensual sex with each other, and they decide that they want to get married, if they were to do that, they will, imprisonment for 10 years. B, a person commits an offense if that person conducts a marriage ceremony between persons of the same sex and shall, on conviction, be liable to imprisonment for a maximum of 10 years. Okay, what the hell? For individuals. 14, promotion of homosexuality. 1, a person who, A, participates in production, procuring, marketing, broadcasting, disseminating, publishing of pornographic materials for purposes of promoting homosexuality. B, funds or sponsors homosexuality or other related activities. C, offers premises and other related fixed or movable assets for purposes of homosexuality or promoting homosexuality. D, uses electronic devices which include internet, films, mobile phones for purposes of homosexuality or promoting homosexuality, or E, who acts as an accomplice or attempts to promote or in any way abets homosexuality and related practices, commits an offense and is liable, on conviction, to a fine not exceeding 5,000 currency points or imprisonment for a term not exceeding 5 years, or both. 2, where the offender is a corporate body, a business, an association, or a non-governmental organization. A, the director, proprietor, or promoter shall be liable on conviction for the offense under subsection 1, and B, the court shall, on conviction of the offender, order the cancellation of the certificate of registration. Part 4, miscellaneous. 15, special powers of court. The court shall, in determining whether to impose a sentence of imprisonment for any related offenses under this act, have regard to the need for rehabilitating the person and may order the minister to facilitate the rehabilitation of that person in the length of the period of the sentence. Oh, come through, religion, come through. 2, in assessing the need for rehabilitation, the court shall have regard to A, evidence of past conduct and behavior of the offender, B, character of the offender, and C, criminal record. 3, a magistrate court may, if satisfied that a child is likely to engage in acts of homosexuality, upon application by any person, issue a protection order. 4, where the protection order is issued in respect of a child, the magistrate court may issue appropriate order for the child as it deems necessary. 16, extradition. A person charged with an offense under this act shall be liable to extradition under the existing extradition laws. And 17, regulations. The minister may, by statutory instrument, make regulations for better carrying out the provisions of this act. And the last part is currency point. 1 currency point is equivalent to 20,000 shillings. And that is the Anti-Homosexuality Bill of 2023 that they're pushing in Uganda. So basically, this bill is so broad, this bill literally reeks of the rhetoric of a lot of religious institutions. And if you do your research, which I know a lot of these people don't, but if you do your research, you will see how this new bill was inspired, motivated, and financed by evangelicals from America over to Africa and Uganda in particular. And again, if this country is willing to enact this bill without any proof, it would be one thing if it was overwhelming amounts of objective proof, statistics, facts, it was right there in your face, it was recorded in your face, that would be one thing. But this bill was created out of fear and from a religious standpoint. But now that we've read the bill, let's move over to the William Institute, part of the UCLA School of Law, and once again have an objective standpoint to see if what is actually being said is actually happening. And according, to the William Institute, which was founded in 2001, and they are the ones who actually do the research, who actually study to show themselves approved in regards to sexuality and gender identity. Because we know that the people over there in Uganda are not going to do their research. I think in the clip that I have, the president over there, Mussolini, said that, from what I heard they're bad. So you haven't even done your research. Wow. Now let's read from the Williams Institute, the individuals who actually did the research, On March 21st of 2023, the Ugandan parliament passed legislation that further criminalizes the identities and behavior of lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgendered, and intersex people in Uganda. Among other things, the Anti-Homosexuality Bill imposes a life sentence on consensual same-sex conduct among adults, which is already criminalized, and adds the death penalty for so-called aggravated homosexuality. where same-sex acts involve children or people with disabilities, or where drugs or alcohol may impair judgment. Furthermore, it criminalized activities that promote homosexuality with up to 20 years in prison. The bill explicitly aims to protect the traditional family through a number of measures. This brief describes scientific research that directly responds to the purported arguments in support of the anti-homosexuality bill. In bold are excerpts from the bill's stated principles for protecting the traditional family. Below each principle is a discussion of relevant research and data. Okay? The anti-homosexuality bill aims to protect the traditional family by strengthening the nation's capacity to deal with emerging internal and external threats to the traditional heterosexual family. Research from a number of different countries indicates that same-sex relationships have no negative impact on the formation of heterosexual families. And again, all of the statistics are in this article, so you can click and read it for yourself, okay? No shade. Substantial literature has evaluated the effects of changes in legal recognition of same-sex couples on heterosexual marriage in the U.S. A large study from 2021 examining 18 years of data found that same-sex marriage has no meaningful effect on individuals in different sex households. Another study from 2020, which looked exclusively at data from Massachusetts after the state legalized same-sex marriage in 2004, likewise found no negative effect on marriage rates among heterosexuals. These studies confirm the findings of previous research on the effects of marriage equality that found no impact on either marriage or divorce rates of heterosexual couples. Indeed, an earlier study in Massachusetts found that 5 years after same-sex couples were permitted to marry in the state, the divorce rate actually dropped from 2.3 divorces per 1,000 residents in 2007 to 2.0 divorces per 1,000 residents in 2008, representing the lowest divorce rate in the entire U.S. and the lowest it has been since the 1940s. Studies from outside the U.S. have produced similar results. A 2015 study of 28 OECD member countries found that legal recognition of same-sex couples had no negative effects on family formation as measured by rates of marriage, divorce, or extramarital birth. Earlier data from Denmark, Norway, Sweden, Iceland, and the Netherlands, also share that extending relationship recognition to same-sex couples had no obvious impact on the marriage rates or divorce rates of different sex couples. In addition, data from Denmark, Norway, and the Netherlands showed that same-sex relationships did not affect the proportion of children born to unmarried heterosexual parents. In these countries, there has been no change to non-marital birth rates trends as a result of extending relationship recognition to same-sex couples. Protecting children and youth who are made vulnerable to sexual abuse through homosexuality and related acts. More than 30 years of research has found that children raised by lesbian and gay parents are as well adjusted psychologically, emotionally, and socially as children raised by heterosexual parents. Hundreds of articles about gay or lesbian parents and their children have been published in peer-reviewed journals and books. These studies have found no appreciable difference in the outcomes of children raised by gay or lesbian parents. A seminal study of 106 families in the U.S. found that the adopted children of gay or lesbian parents were developing in typical ways, just like the adopted children of heterosexual couples. Similarly, A longitudinal study of lesbian mothers and their children found that the children were psychologically well-adjusted. According to their mothers' reports, the adolescent children rated significantly higher in measures of social competence and school/academic competence than adolescents raised by heterosexual parents. The children raised by lesbian mothers also rated lower in social problems, rule breaking, and problem behavior than the adolescents raised by heterosexual parents. This same longitudinal study additionally found that the adolescent children did not show differences in quality of life when compared to adolescents raised by heterosexual parents. Further, no child raised by lesbian mothers had been physically or sexually abused by a caregiver. Many professional organizations agree that lesbian and gay people parent as well as heterosexual people. For example, the American Academy of Pediatrics has adopted a policy statement asserting that scientific evidence affirms that children have similar developmental and emotional needs and receive similar parenting whether they are raised by parents of the same or different genders. Likewise, the American Sociological Association has stated that the clear and consistent social science consensus is that children raised by same-sex parents fare just as well as children raised by different sex parents. Beyond personal development, research shows that children and youth are not made vulnerable to sexual abuse by the existence of homosexuality. Research suggests that most pedophiles who prey upon young people identify as heterosexual, and their victims are more likely to be female. A 1978 study found that female children were victims of sexual assault almost twice as often as male children. More than 3/4, 78% of offenders in this study were exclusively heterosexual in their identification and partnerships. None of the offenders in this study identified solely as homosexual. Several studies, including one conducted in 1994, found that the majority of children who had been sexually abused were abused by a man or a woman who was or had been in a heterosexual relationship with a relative. This study found that a child's risk of being molested by his or her relative's heterosexual partner is over 100 times greater than by someone who may be identified as gay, lesbian, or bisexual. More recent analysis find that there is no evidence to suggest that individuals with same-sex attraction are more likely to abuse children than heterosexual persons. This legislation further recognizes the fact that same-sex attraction is not an innate and immutable characteristic. There is little consensus on the exact reasons why an individual has a heterosexual or homosexual orientation, whether genetic, hormonal, developmental, social, or cultural. However, despite a lack of consensus on what causes different sexual orientations, current scientific and professional consensus reflects the understanding that sexual orientation is felt as something both innate, i.e. inherent and inborn, and immutable, i.e. irreversible and unchangeable for most people. Research shows that the core feelings that form the basis of adult sexual orientation begin in early childhood, and most parents and most adults, homosexual and heterosexual, report feeling little choice in their sexual orientation. Moreover, studies over the past 2 decades provide strong evidence for the likelihood that some aspect of both male and female homosexuality is heritable. For example, studies of twins have found moderate to large heritabilities for sexual orientation in both men and women. And a 2019 study that analyzed genetic samples from nearly 478,000 individuals in the US and the United Kingdom found that same-sex sexual behavior, is influenced by a multitude of genetic factors. In 1973, the American Psychiatric Association removed homosexuality from its list of mental disorders, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. All major mainstream mental health organizations in the U.S. now recognize homosexuality as an identity and not a disorder. Similarly, in 1990, the World Health Organization declassified homosexuality as a disorder in the International Statistical Classification of Diseases and Related Health Problems, ICD, which serves as a global standard for determining health services and coverage by health insurance. Since then, national mental health organizations around the world have adopted policies affirming that homosexuality is not a mental disorder, but rather a naturally occurring variation in human sexuality. Following this understanding, leading national mental health organizations have expressed concern about therapies or other practices that claim to be able to change one's sexual orientation. Notably, there is no evidence to show that these therapies are safe or effective. In August 2009, the American Psychological Association, APA, Task Force on Appropriate Therapeutic Responses to Sexual Orientation conducted a systematic review of research on sexual orientation change efforts. Based on the task force findings, the APA concluded that these treatments are unsuccessful and can even be harmful. It adopted a policy stating that mental health professionals should not tell clients that they can change their sexual orientation through so-called reparative therapies. Furthermore, in 2013, the APA issued a position statement reiterating that no credible evidence exists that any mental health intervention can reliably and safely change sexual orientation, nor, from a mental health perspective, does sexual orientation need to be changed. In 2016, the World Psychiatric Association echoed this in a position statement indicating that there is no sound scientific evidence that innate sexual orientation can be changed. And if you want to read the full brief, you can click the link below that says download the full brief. Again, it's Pride Month. We understand as queer people, we've understood the Christian side of it, the religious side of it. We've understood the fear-based side of it. But if we're going to do a proper analysis, keyword proper, objective analysis, you have to look at a timeline that is credible and that is concrete. And when we look at those who are anti-queer, they say the same shit, but they don't have any fucking proof. But Uganda, that's the thing about fear. Fear is just as powerful as love. It's not more powerful, but it's just as powerful as love. People fear what they do not understand, and they will begin to hate what they fear. And this bill is a bill of hate. There is no statistics, there's no facts, there's no receipts, there is no overwhelming amount of evidence to support what's going on. But when you operate in fear, you don't need all the other shit. You're just believing what it is you want to believe. And now the people over in Uganda now have to literally suppress who they are, because this bill is broad and it speaks and reeks of religious rhetoric, but they cannot prove the rhetoric. Queer people, again, y'all need to figure out a way to protect yourself. I'm not fear-mongering. I'm literally just helping you to understand the reality of it. And if I'm not mistaken, let me pull this up here really quickly. Here in America, 540 anti-LGBTQ bills have been introduced in state legislation, which is a new record. Over 220 bills specifically targeting trans and non-binary people, which is a new record. And 45 anti-LGBTQ laws have been enacted. This is what the power of fear looks like. And this is why I'm going to keep my foot on the necks of ignorant ass people. It's one thing to have an opinion, but unfortunately, it doesn't just stop there as an opinion. Y'all literally make y'all opinions fact in law. And the reason why y'all afraid of queer people, because it's a fear there, is because y'all are queerphobic. And y'all understand, especially here in America, the repercussions of being queerphobic. Didn't the scripture read to do unto others as you want them to do unto you? So now that queer people are liberating themselves and they don't need your permission to be themselves, you feel some type of way. Because you see, you have to stand on their backs in order to feel good about yourself. You have to stand on the back of queer people, judge queer people, ostracize queer people, and in Uganda, imprison or murder them in order for you to be strong in your faith. And isn't that what Jesus minored in? Didn't he major in love? But see, we understand that a lot of people, they say love, but they don't understand it and yet don't even know how to apply it in the opportunities, in the experiences where people need love. So again, for my queer brothers and sisters, love yourself, love each other, and protect yourself. Because these people are coming for us. Stay vigilant, stay prayed the fuck up, and if anybody decides to overstep their boundaries from verbal to physical, you take their ass to the motherfucking night water.